Hello and welcome to this video on primitive data types in Java. In this video, we will be talking in detail about primitive data types and the 8 predefined primitive data types. Now let's have a quick recap on the last video that we saw. Primitive data types are of 4 types: Boolean, character, integer and float. Integer is of 4 types: byte, short, int and long, and float is of 2 types: float and double. So let's look at each one of the concepts here. So the first primitive data type that we are going to look at is Boolean type. The Boolean data type has two possible values, either true or false. Boolean is most probably used in cases where you have only two conditions, yes or no, on, off, true, false, good, bad, etc. So the default value for Boolean will be false. You can make it true. So let's see how to declare that. We can declare a Boolean variable by typing Boolean and the variable name a equal to, and you can either give true or false. True and false. So to check if it's working, true. As you can see, the answer that we had here is printed. The another value that you can give for a is false. Now, other than these two values, if I try to provide any other value like 1 or 2, see there's an error throwing up. Let's see what happens when you try to print this out. Java C. As you can see, an error is thrown where incompatible types int cannot be converted to a boolean. So this is about boolean values. The next primitive data type that we are going to look at is char type. It's a 16-bit Unicode character. Java provides char to save one particular character in it. Let us see how to initialize it. We give char and a variable name, and now I can assign any of the characters in my keyboard. For example, I can provide y and give semicolon. Now let me try to print it out. As you can see, it's able to print y. Now I can also provide capital Y. By doing capital Y, let's see what happens. Capital Y. So one thing you need to understand is that a capital Y is completely a different character from small y, and both cannot be equated as same values. Another thing to note in character is that you cannot give more than one character for the variable to store. When you try to do that, let's see what error is thrown. As you can see, while you're trying to compile, you'll get an error where unclosed character literal, meaning a cannot be stored because the space for character is only 1 byte and it cannot exceed over that. So next we are going to look at integer types. In integer types, you have 4 different ways of doing it. One is byte, next is short, next is int, and last is long. So we'll look at bytes first. So the byte data type can have values from -128 to 127. So this is because it is an 8-bit sign to complement integer, and the byte has the capacity to store that much values. So the default value for byte is 0. So let us look at how to initialize it. We can initialize a byte data type by giving byte space and the variable name a, and assign values ranging from -127 to +127. So if my value is 126 and I try to print that value, let's look at what happens. So 126 is printed. Now I'll be able to store negative values also. As you can see, negative values are also printed. Now if I try to print more than 127, let's take 300. As you can see, we are getting an error where incompatible types, possible lossy conversion from int to byte. So the value 300 cannot be stored inside byte because the memory location can only store values from the range of -127 to 127. So now we'll be looking at short type. The short data type in Java can have values from -32,768 to 32,767. It's a 16-bit signed 2's complement integer. So meaning the values between these ranges can be stored within short type. So the default value again for the short type is 0. Let us look at how to initialize short. We can initialize short by providing short and the variable name and store values between the range that I provided. For example, 30,000 and give semicolon. And let's see if I can print this value. As you can see, we are able to print this value. We can also print the negative values. -30,000. If I go beyond the limit that I said, maybe 40,000, as you can see an error has been underlined. We are getting an error where incompatible types, possible lossy conversion from int to short. So we have to stick within the limits, and if your variable is going to stick within these limits, you can use short. So next we'll be looking at int type. The int type can have values from -2 power 31 to 2 power 31 minus 1. So these values are 32 bits signed to complement integers. So the int data type has this capacity to store values between this bit range. If you are having Java 8 or later, you can use an unsigned 32-bit integer. This will have a minimum value of 0 and maximum value of 2 power 32 minus 1. So the default value for int is also 0. Let us look at how to initialize int. We can initialize int by providing int and the variable name and assign values. Let me assign a large value and try to print the value. As you can see, we are able to print the value. I can also print the negative of this value. As you can see, it is printed. But if I want to go a very large number, this is going to throw an error. The error here is integer number too large because the value here is beyond 2 power 32. Integer is one of the most commonly used variable for numbers as it is finding a middle ground between byte and long. So now we'll be looking at long type. The long data type can have values from -2 power 63 to 2 power 63 minus 1. It's nothing but a 64-bit signed 2's complement integer. If you're using Java 8 or later, you can use an unsigned 64-bit integer with a minimum value of 0 to a maximum value of 2 power 64 minus 1. The default value for long is 0. Now let us look at how to initialize long. We can initialize long by providing long and the variable name and associate it with a very large number, for example this much zeros, and then I should end the value with L to specify that this is a long integer. Once this is done, let's see how it is printed. As you can see, a very large number is easily printed using long. So this is about integers. Next we'll be looking at float. So this is about integers. Next we'll be looking at float. So next we'll be looking at float type. There are two types of float type. A normal float data type is a single precision 32-bit floating point and the default value is nothing but 0.0. Well, let us look at how to initialize the normal float. So we can initialize it by using float and the variable name and provide 0.0 and end it with the variable f. Once this is done, I'll be able to print this out. And then another type of floating point value is double. And double can be initialized using the value d and semicolon. Now let me try to print this. As you can see, both the values are printed. These values can also be negative. As you can see, it is able to print the negative values also. The difference between float and double is that double can handle twice the value ranges of float can handle. So for very large decimal values, we'll prefer double over float. Float itself has the capacity to handle large values. So in this video, we saw about each primitive data types and how they are used and the default values for them and the ranges that it can handle. Thank you.